So when we're talking about the stress escalation ladder, we're talking about a system of explanation that was put together by Trude Rugas, who is somebody that's done a lot of research in calming signals. And we talk about calming signals and displacement signals kind of throughout this session. And really what they are pieces of body language or behaviors that allow us to determine how stressed an animal is. So displacement behavior is really basically equivalent to fiddling with my hair or chewing on my nails, or just kind of bouncing my knee. Those are displacement behaviors. I might even be somebody that, in order to displace some of the anxiety in the room, might throw around some jokes, right? Those are human versions of displacement behaviors. For dogs, it's going to be things like excessive sniffing, sudden urge, and excessive scratching. It may also be a displacement offering of play. So you may reach for them and then they offer a play bout and then they bound away. And that's more about displacing and also kind of avoiding that situation that may make them a little bit anxious or uncomfortable. So as we go up the scale, we talk about calming signals. Now, calming signals are in green. So if you look at the line above, you're going to see that that means low levels of stress, right? So these calming signals indicate to us that they're feeling a little bit stressed, but they're in a state where they want to try to diffuse the situation. So what we're going to see are things that we may see in normal situations with dogs, and you might go, well, yawning is the first one up there. My dog yawns all the time when they're tired. Totally. But what we're talking about is yawning out of context. So your dog's not sitting in their bed at home having just woken up for a nap. Yawning, we're talking about you offer the dog a leash and it yawns and turns its head away and lip licks. That would be a display of calming signals. Okay, so look at that list. We've got yawning and lip licking, again, out of context. So not when you're holding a piece of bacon in front of their face and they're trying to lick the drool off. No, this is lip licking or tongue flicking when they are saying, I'm uncomfortable. Turning away or looking away are ways to break eye contact. For humans, holding eye contact is a form of social etiquette, right? But in the dog world, holding consistent and kind of strained eye contact, that's actually confrontational, right? So if I'm not breaking eye contact to a dog, they're going to take that as confrontational. So dogs to themselves or to other conspecifics to other dogs are going to heavy blink, they're going to look away, they're going to turn away, and they may even move away as a more extreme version of that. Okay, so when we're seeing all of those behaviors, those are those are calming signals. Okay, so as we move up the scale to stress reactions, notice that it goes from a little bit of a green to more yellowish, but not quite yellow. So that stress reaction is going to be kind of that in-between space between low levels of stress and preparing to take action. So your stress reactions are going to be behaviors that are going to indicate that the dog is in stress. So panting, right? We see panting all the time. Again, out of context. I'm not talking when it's 75 plus degrees outside and they're walking on the asphalt. No, 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 no. This is like in the intake room where nothing's going on and the dog is sitting there going, that's stress panting, right? So you see that all the time. Pupil dilation is an arousal response, right? It's a stress response. It's a physiological response that the dog is trying to bring in more light to see what's going on in their environment. Humans do it too, right? So shaking off adrenaline, not in the bathtub, not when they just came out of the ocean, shaking off, going sort of like shaking off the heebie-jeebies, right? So we are trying to reset. So that's not necessarily a bad cue. Actually, most of the time you may hear the behavior team going, good job, good shake off. Of course, we're reinforcing it for ourselves and they may not be making that connection, but recognizing that they're doing a shake off is important. Recognizing that they're trying to de-stress themselves. Sweating paws. Dogs have scent glands in their paws, right? So when they are sweating, they are diffusing some of that high body stress, right? Same way that we do when we're sweating through t-shirts and stuff in stressful situations. You guys have the benefit of having tile floor throughout most of the facility, so you're going to see those little footprints when they're walking around. And again, I'm not talking about they stepped in the pool and they stepped out of the pool. No, this is a dog walking through the building where there's plenty of AC that's leaving little sweaty footprints when they go. The dog is pretty stressed, okay? When we're talking about trembling or shaking, again, it's an arousal response. Arousal can be a good thing, can be a bad thing, right? When you're ready to go watch a horror movie, you're aroused, you're stressed, you're physiologically, your body is pumping at a higher heart rate, right? So yes, you may be shaking because you are about to do something that's really, really exciting, like jump out of an airplane. And you could also be shaking because you're hiding in a corner because you're afraid of somebody with a knife, right? So what we want to note is that this is something that we would see consistently if an animal was pretty stressed. When we are talking about whale eye, right, we're talking about when the pupils are really big and all you can see is those whites on the edge of the eye. It looks like a whale's eye, which is why we call it whale eye. That is, again, an indicator that the dog is aroused or stressed, right? Not necessarily a sign of comfort and relaxation. Hackling, or a piloerection, which basically just means that the hair follicles are standing straight up, right? We're going to see a lot of that as an arousal response, specifically between the shoulder blades. This research has told us that between the shoulder blades, that's more of a sign of arousal. Whereas right above the rump, right above the base of the tail, if those hackles are up, that actually indicates that the animal is perceiving a threat is incoming. Okay, so it's a little bit more important to note when there's hackles right above the rear, and you're going to might see those in dog-dog interactions rather than dog-human interactions, but it's something worth noting. As we continue up that scale, I want you to see where it says focus in the yellow box. So specifically, it says loss of calming signals, and then it says close mouth or freeze. What we're seeing is we go a little bit of displacement, more calming signals, way more stress reactions, and then boom, that yellow drops down significantly. This is where we see less behavior. This is why throughout this class, Yona and I are going to mention lack of behavior is a concern. Okay, so that tells us the dog is stressing further. We're going to see a little bit of suppression, a little bit of shutdown. The dog is trying to assess whether they're going to fight, flight, or freeze. But the dog is getting to a point where they're going, I may have to remove myself or handle the situation differently. Okay, so in those moments, we're going to see less calming signals. Dogs are going to go into a state where they're going to conserve some of that excess energy. I'm not going to waste all of my calories displaying all of these stress signals and asking you for space and please don't hurt me and all of these things if those aren't working to get my point across, right? So I'm going to do less and less of those behaviors. Then as I get into that red zone, and for this, we're just talking about red zone as the words that are listed in red. So I'm going to talk about those extreme levels of stress where the dog is forced to take action. Now, Troy specifically used the word forced because the dog has been demonstrating all of these other things to avoid having to get to this point where they are listed, behaviors listed in red. So we're going to see maybe showing teeth. You're specifically see those pointy ones up front. When I'm really stressed, I'm going to have my mouth open enough that you're going to be able to see those molars back here. But when I'm ready to tell you off, I'm not going to show you my butter knives, right? I'm going to bring out the steak ones, right? So they're going to show you the important weaponry they got going on. Whether or not they're broken or not, that's the behavior they're going to show, right? Growling, that's a distance increasing signal, right? So when we get to these red zone behaviors, distance increasing signals. You're going to see a freeze. You're going to see showing teeth. You're going to see that low growl. You're going to see that hard stare. You're going to see different body language signals in this red zone. And all of those body language signals mean stop and move away, right? So that's telling us that the dog went from, haha, please don't, to that's enough now, okay? So that body language is different, right? Notice that flight and withdrawal are actually in that, and that's an important thing to note. The dog is trying to move away. Now, if the dog is trying to get away from you and they're on a tether in the intake room or on a tether post-surgery or prep for surgery, that dog has that ability of flight and withdrawal completely removed, which means they've got one less coping skill to manage in those situations. Okay, so that's just something to note and be aware of. The next step up is lunge. And the next step up above that is bite. Those things are two separate things. Yes, sometimes you're going to have a dog that lunges and bites. But for the most part, as we're going up that stress escalation ladder, I'm going to lunge at you and growl and snarl and bark, and I'm going to do all of these behaviors here to avoid having to bite. I don't want to have to bite. That takes a lot of extra risk on my end as the animal. And if I'm a survivor, I'm trying to avoid conflict because conflict can lead to injury, which can lead to infection and death, right? So we're all going to avoid that as much as we can. That's still something they've got in their genetics. So I'm going to avoid bite as much as possible. But for those dogs that are forced to readily go up that scale and go up that scale and go up that scale again, I'm going to spend less and less time in that bottom zone, spend less time in displacement, less time in calming signals, less time in stress reactions, because those aren't working, right? So it's important when we're interacting with the dog, when we're seeing those green, those yellow, those extra yellow behaviors, pause, assess, adjust your approach. If we're pushing them into red and pushing them into red and pushing them into red, we're more likely to only see red behaviors, right? If the red behaviors are getting what they need, which is more space, they're going to rely on those red behaviors. If I have to bite you in order to get you to back off, the next time I might be more likely to bite you, or at least I'm going to show you, hey, remember last time how I had to bite? I'll do it again, right? I'm going to show you those teeth. So when we're interacting with these dogs, every single interaction is a learning opportunity for those dogs. So it's important to keep them out of those red list of behaviors whenever possible, because we really want to give them a better set of coping skills to go out into the world with their adopter, because not every adopter is going to understand that. A dog displaying red behaviors is not a bad dog. It's usually a scared dog, or a dog that has been trained or taught based on experience that those are the only behaviors they get what they need, which is space, right? So we want to help them not have to practice those behaviors whenever possible. And we may be doing things like hanging shower curtains over their kennels, or using an adjacent exit rather than the main exit. We may be asking handlers not to approach. We may pause on our intake. We may decide, hey, you know what? I don't have to look in his ears today. We'll wait on that. And that's so we're not pushing and pushing just to get what we need to get done, because that dog is learning in that interaction, whether we intend them to learn something or not.